Welcome everyone to episode 9 of the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. Now, as most of you know, I am the lead singer of the rock band Vertebreaker. And when I started this podcast, I wasn't sure how quickly or how heavily I wanted to bring the band in right away, because I kind of wanted to establish this as its own thing. I didn't know if I should wait a little bit. I do still think that I should, maybe create a separate podcast strictly for the band, which it's not just about me, it's with all 5 of us. But I figured now that I have a few episodes under my belt, it might be a good time to start bringing the rest of the band in one by one. And I figured this might be a way to get to know each of us individually. So I wanted to start by bringing in the guy who I pretty much formed this band with. He's definitely the quietest of the 5 of us, and he's not used to doing this sort of thing, but I know that he's going to do just fine. And it's funny, in a very real way. He's the man who rarely gets to say anything, but sometimes he's the one who should say everything. He is one half of Vertebreaker's guitar duo, a brilliant guitarist and songwriter, Ryan Cowell. What's up, buddy?
How's it going, Jack?
Going good. And by the way, this is the first one-on-one, face-to-face thing we've had, because we've tried this before, and we've had problems with Skype and all kinds of other stuff, but I just came down here to your apartment, and we're just doing this live in person. I'm seeing you right now. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, man. Just got a couple of hours of sleep under my belt. So
Nice. You had a long day at work?
Oh yeah. Long week. It's getting to that. It's getting to that end. So.
No doubt. But let's talk music for a little bit, man. I think you and I had talked about this before, but how old were you when you started playing guitar?
I was about 17 years old. Started out on bass around 15 years old.
Right.
That's when I first got introduced to music. Couldn't really handle the guitar at age 15. It was just too much for me at the time.
Oh, so 15 is when you started playing bass?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Now, do you remember what brought that on? Was it just being a fan of music, or was it wanting to jam with your friends?
Yeah, it was pretty much my friends. One of my buddies growing up was a guitar player, and I always heard him play, and I always wanted to be able to play like him, whatnot. And when I made the attempt, it was just couldn't really grasp the concept of it yet. And
you figured bass would be a little easier to start off on?
So pretty much, he already had a bass, and he'd given that to me, and pretty much, hey man, just start out with one string and work your way pretty much.
Well, hey, it's nice you didn't have to drop a bunch of money on it originally, right?
Well, definitely. I mean, I ended up getting my own in the end.
Nice.
And whatnot. And when I first started out, I was playing bass in a band, and pretty much the second I was able to convert over to guitar again, and
what made you want to make that switch?
Pretty much just once I got to know how to play bass, pretty much. Once I had the fingering and had the mechanics worked out, and was able to go back, and I saw one of my buddies learning a song. It was actually the Crazy Train riff.
Right.
Yeah. That riff there, and I saw him learning it from like a tab, and I was like, man, I think I can do that,
Right.
I was like, hey, let me get that thing for a minute, and I was able to play the riff, and that pretty much what started it.
It's funny how that works sometimes. Sometimes the instrument you start off on isn't necessarily the one that you end up with. Sometimes you might find something like guitar, you figure like maybe I'm better able to express myself that way. Did you think that was the case, or were you just drawn to the 6 string a little bit more like that?
I'd say, well, I don't know. I feel like with bass playing, you really have to be that bass player, to really have that groove, the lock in with the drummer and stuff. And
yeah.
I feel like that's something I really never really had.
Right. You didn't feel like so much of a rhythm player. You wanted to do more melodic stuff.
Right.
I get that totally. That makes sense, man. Now, were you always like a fan of hard rock and metal music growing up, or?
I've actually ranged from pretty much anything you can think of. I mean, I'm not even gonna lie to you. I mean, as a kid, started out with like pop and rap music, and pretty much slowly progressed my way from light rock to heavy rock. I mean, I started out listening to crap like Blink-182, Green Day, you know, that kind of
more
stuff.
like the pop punk
kind of
genre.
thing, and pretty much
right
just like progressively as I went on through the years, just progressively got into heavier music. My sister was really into like heavy bands like Korn and Marilyn Manson, Limp Bizkit, all that stuff growing up. So I was always hearing it. I wasn't really into it at that time.
Right.
But as the years went on,
and a lot of those bands, obviously, that era that blended a lot of like hip hop and rock together.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the Limp Bizkit stuff, it was
Park,
rap rock very much so.
A lot of things that definitely broke you in there. I did used to listen to rap in my elementary years. Used to listen to a lot of Michael Jackson.
What are some bands or artists that people might be surprised to hear that you're a fan of? Like, and not necessarily guilty pleasures, but just stuff that people wouldn't necessarily expect. Oh, Ryan's into them? I didn't know.
Definitely the Michael Jackson thing. I was
Nice.
a big fan of that growing up. I had the double cassette disc or whatnot of the greatest hits, and I used to get down to that all the time.
It's like History Part 1?
Yep.
Yeah, I love Michael and Prince and all that stuff too. So it's funny. Someone recently asked me that. It was actually Lance Hall. I did remember that interview I did recently. So it's funny how stuff like that lines up. And certainly there was some rock influence. There was some crossover here and there. I mean, Beat It. Come on.
Definitely.
So but yeah. So obviously you were always a fan of music, and you know, were there any particular guitar players that made you want to like really, at least early on, were like one of your biggest influences? Or?
I've always been into like the guitar duo. I've always been a big fan of the guitar harmonies, the two-part harmonies. I've always been a good fan of like James Hetfield and Kirk Hammett. I've always been a big Metallica fan growing up. Just that dual guitar sound, that big sound. And I was introduced to Avenged Sevenfold, which became one of my favorite acts who I've been following for a long time now.
Oh, you have the Death Bat tattoo to prove it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Everyone knows, they've seen it on your right shoulder and all that. That's dedication, folks, to have that inked on your skin permanently. Mm-hmm. You know, it's I mean, I like, I've always loved the guitar duo thing as well. Like almost like like I think Judas Priest really set the tone for that, at least in the early '80s, when you would have two guitars playing sort of the same thing, so it would sound like almost one big guitar. Yeah. But you'd also have each player kind of complementing each other. And I remember, because I remember like when I first started like really singing for bands, and like not like just singing, not playing bass and singing. People were like, Jack, you can play guitar a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, but like I can play guitar a little bit, but I'd almost rather concentrate on singing and have two really good guitar players in a band, as opposed to me. I'm more of a functional guitar player. Like, I can get around it a little bit, but I mean, obviously, like what you do, it's very intricate riffs and stuff like that, and melodies. Now, I mean, certainly as it relates to Vertebreaker, I remember in the early days, that was a big thing, because first it was you and Jake, then Greg came in. How important is it to be in a band with two guitars and to have chemistry with that other guitar player?
It's extremely important for me, actually, because I don't know, pretty much a lot of music that I write, I'm usually thinking of a second guitar in my head already, and I usually write a lot of my licks around two guitars. I'm always hearing that. I've never been a one-band guitar kind of guy, I guess you could say. I always yearn for that two guitar part in there, so I base a lot of my riffs around that and try to incorporate them together.
Definitely, and that's been such a huge part of our sound from day one, is a lot of the riffs that you come up with. Like, I know that you usually have Greg doing like the really flashy solo stuff. You're almost more of like the straight up songwriter, because you come in with a lot of the riffs idea, and usually usually you'll have them arranged. If not, then either like Rod or myself will step in and try to arrange a little bit. But for the most part, like, a lot of your riffs has become like the backbone of our band's sound. do you see yourself more as a songwriter as opposed to like a lead guitar player?
I've never really considered myself that lead guitar player. There's always room for improvement and whatnot. Yeah, I feel Greg's a better lead guitar player than me. He comes up with a lot of really interesting stuff that I might have not even come up with. But yeah, I've always been a riff writer, or always trying to come up with a concept for a song. That's always really
No. I know exactly what you mean because you know, people don't realize like a lot of like the quote unquote rhythm guitarists in bands. Usually they'll be the ones who were like writing the songs, and usually the lead guys kind of concentrate on that end of it. So like you'll have guys like Izzy Stradlin or Zachy Vengeance, or guys like that who have more to do with the sound than people realize. It's almost like being a bass player in a way, where it's like you're not necessarily there in everyone's face, but you're still really driving the rhythm. So it's like you have that conduit between the rhythm section and the melody, and it's a very important part of the band. And I wouldn't necessarily say that you're a better or worse lead player than Greg is. In fact, I know really since Greg has joined the band, I've noticed how much more comfortable you've been in taking solos here and there. Like Countdown, for example, you have that really like big sweeping part, which is like one of the main hooks of the song. And I think Greg is certainly a more like flashy, like technical kind of guy, but you have just more that straight ahead. It's almost a little bit more melodic, but also rhythmic at the same time. It's hard to describe. Would you say that that's fairly accurate?
I'd say you're on point there.
Nice. Now, getting back to your early history, you had played bass and jammed with friends of yours. What were some of the earlier bands that you were in before Vertebreaker?
I played with a lot of different people. But the hardest thing about bands is finding the right people with the right connections and whatnot. The only project that I had managed to get off the ground and actually play shows out, we played a string of shows. This is Chaos to the Masses.
Right.
It's pretty much the guys that got me into guitar in the first place. We just started writing together and picked up a couple other members and whatnot, and we tried to make it work, but But like most bands, it's a hard thing to keep together. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I remember when you and I first met. That was like my first because I don't think you had too much stuff in the way of recording, but you sent me some YouTube videos of Chaos to the Masses playing out, and so there was definitely that, which was a much different sound, obviously, than Vertebreaker does, but still, I at least got to see like, okay, this is kind of where this guy's coming from, and so Chaos to the Masses was really one of the only bands that you were in that actually played out. I think, was there another band called Self-Inflicted you were in?
Yeah, it was an acoustic project I did with one of the members from Chaos to the Masses,
oh,
actually Stephen James from Dare Defy.
Yeah. He's been a buddy of yours for a long time, and possible future guest.
Yeah, so pretty much why we couldn't be doing the electric and whatnot, just went out and tried to make a couple extra bucks and do something a little different. It's just fun and all, but it's a lot more fun to be out there doing the full live set, the electrics and everything. But it's cool to get both aspects, and maybe that prepared me for our future acoustic performances with Vertebreaker.
Sure. And I know that you had known Rod earlier on. I mean, you were actually the one that brought Rod into the band. How did you guys know each other? Like, where did you guys meet?
I met him through another player I had found pretty much through the internet through a website called the Bandmate, and I pretty much posted my profile on there. I'm seeking other musicians or other bands, just trying to put out feelers there because I'd stick with the same guys for a long time, because I had the connection there with them. It's just everything else wasn't there. So yeah, pretty much put out some feelers, and this one guy hit me up, this guy Dale, and he was a really good guitar player. He was in some really heavy music, and he actually happened to live in the upstairs apartment right above Rod Bobo, and I guess Rod had been jamming out with him on the side as well, and he'd introduced me to Rod, and we all three got together and started writing some songs. We didn't have a drummer or anything yet, but we were just trying to get some song ideas together, and but it didn't really progress from there. But I felt the connection between me and Rod. We had some kind of writing ability there, and when the opportunity arose when Vertebreaker didn't have a bass player, it's the first person I thought of, and I knew he'd be a perfect fit.
Definitely.
And it kind of worked out that way, so.
It really did. I remember when he came into the band, and it felt like he had been there the whole time. They're like, I don't even, I think just collectively, you and I just stared at each other like, yep, that's the guy. And you and he continue to have a really strong chemistry, I think, when it comes to writing, and he and Greg definitely making up that instrumental part of it, and along with myself and Jared, obviously, but yeah. So I obviously, when the time came to get a bass player for our new band, Rod was the guy, and like you said, it did turn out really well. I'm trying to remember how you and I first met, really, because I know we met through Craigslist. I forget if it was me who contacted you or you who contacted me. I'm not sure.
I think originally I had contacted you. I'd seen your post on Craigslist about an original band I was looking. Normally, I was always trying to look for a project that wasn't existing or anything,
right,
or didn't have any, because I was wanting to play, come up with music that I was coming up with, or help write the music. I wasn't really into just jumping into a band, I guess, per se.
That's interesting.
And then I was just like, well, that wasn't working for me, and it was really hard to get back out there and stuff. So I was like, oh, maybe we should try a different approach. And I had seen that you guys already had some members and already had some things going on, and I had listened to your previous bands and been like, wow, these guys, sound really good,
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I'll be able to hang with them, but I'm going to give it a try, so.
Right, which, I mean, obviously that was my last band, and Patient, we didn't end up doing those songs anyway, so that's interesting that you say that when it comes to, jumping into another band as opposed to starting from scratch, because for me, I figured the hardest thing would be to pretty much do what we did and just start a band pretty much out of nothing. I mean, Jake and I were jamming, a little bit earlier in it, but, I mean, from really, we didn't have too much going in. And when you came in, we were starting really from scratch, and I figured that would be the harder thing. Did you have a tough time before joining bands that were already together? Do you have just a tough time learning other people's stuff, or?
Not really that. It was just I really wanted to play stuff I was coming up with,
Okay.
I wanted to, I know once you can join a band, and after time, you can put in that musical influence and incorporate your own stuff, but I was just always.
You really had your own ideas you wanted to get out there.
Exactly, and I mean.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely, that's cool. So would you say? I mean, obviously that's been kind of your main role in the band as far as being one of the main songwriters. How do you feel about that? As far as your role in the band, because I know that when it comes to necessarily booking shows or doing the business end of it, I know that's not always stuff that you're comfortable with in terms of handling the business end. Do you like being able to kind of lay back and kind of focus on the music more?
I'm down to do both aspects of it. It's just you guys do a good job of keeping up on all that stuff, and yeah, it seems like every time I try to do it, it's just you guys already got it covered.
Well, I mean, it's funny. People say, "Oh, Ryan's so quiet," which, I mean, between myself and Rod, it's probably tough to get a word in edgewise. So I feel bad for you in that regard. But I gotta tell you, man, it's pretty crazy to see how far our band has come in just 2 years. You know what I mean? Because we really started from nothing. I wasn't from here, from Melbourne, I should say, Palm Bay. I moved here from Tampa, St. Pete, nobody knew who we were. I mean, you had some previous experience, so did Rod, but really to see where the band has come from those early days, it's pretty remarkable. And it seems like we've been in it for like about 2 years, and like just now we're kind of starting to get people around here locally who are at least kind of recognizing us, which is a really cool feeling.
Most definitely, it's cool to just have a stable band and have reliable people, and yeah, that's half the battle right there in itself. And
do you think that might be a tough thing for like guys who are younger when they're starting bands, and they kind of expect stuff to happen quicker than it normally does? Because I mean, how it was in the early days where we were just struggling to get people in the doors, and we still do that. When we go to new places who don't know us, but I think do you think it's just a case of like who can be patient the longest?
Well, I don't think that's what our problem was. Yeah, it was just the dedication factor was a hard thing when you're young. You got a lot of other things going on.
Oh yeah.
And pretty much you just need 4 or 5 other guys that are just as dedicated as you.
And especially when you're young. I mean, as people grow up, they want to do different things, and different stuff happens in people's lives, and all that sort of thing, and tempers and stuff like that, and how people relate to other people. And it's also difficult, I guess, getting a lot of creative people together, because maintaining a band is like, it's hard. People say a band is like a marriage. I would say a band is a lot harder than a marriage, because you're dealing with several people.
It's compromising.
Who all feel passionate about where they want to go or what they want to do creatively, and you have to get everyone on the same page, and it's very tough. Obviously, in our band, from the original 5, you and me are kind of the only ones out of the original 5 guys. I mean, Rod's been around almost from the beginning, but really, like, we've had a few guys come and go. But obviously the lineup we've had has been pretty stable. At least the lineup we have now, I should say. I mean, Jared joined the band just a year ago, and everything's been great since then. Like, I can't think of one time where we've had like infighting.
Yeah.
So it's pretty great, as far as that goes. I guess one of my last questions would be like, what do you see in terms of like the goals of the band, or like where do you see this going? How far do you think we might be able to take this? Or
I'm always willing to take it as far as we need to take it. I'm not holding back for anything. Shoot for the stars. I mean, it is a hard business to break into, and there's a lot of great talented bands in this area alone, let alone all over the country and whatnot, and other countries. So there's a lot of great talent out there. But I just enjoy getting out there and playing our music. Whether we're playing to 5 or 500, we're out there, and our music's getting out there somehow. So that to me is success in itself. But of course, I'd always love for it to be more.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't?
Absolutely.
You'd be stupid not to want more. But
You'd be surprised, man. I've met so many guys who like.
Yeah, I've never lived that life before, so I don't know that lifestyle or
what
it takes.
Well, I'm just saying, like, I know a lot of guys who are like really good into music, but like aren't really that into like playing live for people, or like don't really care about having like a ton of success or whatever, or I should say commercial success. Like, a lot of guys don't really care about that sort of thing, or probably don't even want it because they like don't want to be sellouts or whatever. I mean, we've never really had that problem. We're a bunch of musical whores, basically. But yeah, I mean, it always seems like you and I have kind of been on the same page as far as that goes. I know.
I would definitely like to branch out more and play wherever we could. Definitely get out of the state sometime, and maybe put together some kind of tour, maybe for a week or 2 weeks, whatever would allow the other members to be able to do. But
I've got a buddy of mine in Atlantic City, New Jersey, who's like, dude, come up and play. We'll get you booked. You can stay at our house. We'll feed you and everything. So it's like, it's always cool to hear about that, from family and friends who are out of state. So you never know. Well, yeah, it sounds like we're definitely still very much committed to this thing, and we're still having fun. And that's really, I think if neither of us were having fun, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't do it.
Exactly. That's what it's all about in the end.
Yeah, and we certainly, we don't want to play with people who don't make it fun. We've had to deal with that before, but obviously we're having a blast with the guys who we're playing with. So it's, things are good in Vertebreaker, I would say.
But yep, always strive to do better and go bigger.
Gotcha. Now, what are some things about you that fans of the band might not know? Like, what are some of your favorite things to do outside of music?
I like to surf in my spare time. That's a big thing. It almost gives you that good feeling of playing on, not quite the same, but it's. I don't know what I'm saying.
No. That was good. That was good.
Crap.
No. I see what you're saying. Like I remember seeing a thing that about Kirk Hammett, in the Some Kind of Monster documentary. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah, remember that whole scene where he was like talking about how going surfing is like very relaxing for him and kind of centers him. It's almost like meditating in a way. And I don't know if those were his exact words, but he sounded like stuff like that. It almost served a similar purpose that music does, where it's a release. Would you say that that's kind of what surfing brings to you?
I guess you could say that.
Yeah, not to get too new agey on you, but yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. That's awesome. Probably if I had one final question, gun to your head, favorite guitar player? You had to pick one.
Sinister Gates.
Sin Gates. That's a good pick.
That's a typical pick for me.
Yeah, good call, man. So and obviously
there's a million great guitar players. I could name lists of them all day long.
Definitely, and I think that's one of the things you and I bonded over at first, that we were such huge, crazy Avenged Sevenfold fans. But not only that, like, you were also open into like classic rock and stuff like that. And I remember even some of our early stuff was maybe a little bit more bluesy, which wasn't the stuff that you had written, but you were always open to playing different stuff like that, which I think is really good, and I think adds some versatility to our band.
Definitely. Always down to dabble in different styles and make Vertebreaker a more unique sound, something to please everybody.
Definitely, man. Well, this has been great, man. I'm glad we got the chance to do this, and hopefully it wasn't too painful. I know you're not much of a talker, so.
Yeah. We survived. You
did.
Made it through. Hopefully it's entertaining enough to listen to.
Oh, I think so. I think so, man. People who go to see our band, they want to hear this sort of thing. They want to make that personal connection. They want to get to know you. Any final thoughts before we sign off? Anything you want to say to the people out there? Nothing.
I don't know. Damn it. I don't know if Good line out. That's a good line out.
Nah, you don't need a line or anything. Just any final thoughts, anything you want to tell people. Come see us. Come have a good time. That'll work.
See you at the show.
All right. Well, there you go. See, that wasn't so bad, was it? All right. Thanks, man.
Oh man, it's bad.
No, it was fine. Thanks again, dude.
Well, there you go. The podcast debut of Ryan Cowell of Vertebreaker. Great guitar player. One of my partners in crime, man. One of my 4 partners in crime. But he is definitely the co-founder of Vertebreaker alongside myself. And yeah, it's just I'm so proud of how far he's come. Really, just as a songwriter and performer, like I said, and like you could probably tell, he's such a quiet guy. And it's like I was I knew how nervous he was even doing this podcast because he's not used to talking for a while. Even during interviews we have, he he kind of freezes up a little bit. He doesn't really like to talk that much. But, I thought he did great. And, honestly, like nowadays when I see him on stage, I look around and I never know where he's going to be because he's running around, he's banging his head. He's having a great time up there, and he really comes out of his shell when he's on stage, and I'm so proud of him for that. Cause and that's the great thing about music, and being in a band, unless you've done it, it really it's there's no other feeling like it, and it breaks through those walls of self-consciousness, and really allows you to be confident on stage, and at least I hope it does. I certainly hope if you are in a band that it does have that effect on you. It certainly does for me, and it has for Ryan. He becomes a different person on stage, but in a good way. It's still a part of him that it's just something he doesn't necessarily show when he's off stage. But that's the beautiful thing about it. Since this has been a little bit shorter than my typical podcasts, usually I try to get like about an hour or so out of people, but again, it all depends. There's no real time limit on what someone does. If they come on here, they can speak for as little or as much as they want. But I figure since I have time here, I might share with you a little reaction that I have. The big news in rock music this week has been a bombshell that Slash has revealed in an interview, saying that he and Axl Rose have apparently patched things up after 20 years of a bitter split. And really that was like at the root of the original, I should say the original lineup of Guns N' Roses splitting, or at least in their heyday during the mid-90s. And so, of course, for something like that to be announced, has naturally just set off a firestorm of rumors about whether the original band is going to get back together. And by that, I mean the original Appetite lineup, Slash, Axl Rose, Izzy Stradlin, Steven Adler, and Duff McKagan. I guess you could probably throw in Dizzy Reed and Matt Sorum or Gilby Clarke, because they were there during the Use Your Illusion era. Those three guys weren't necessarily original members, but they were certainly there in GNR's heyday. But I guess that has sparked a bunch of reunion rumors. Is it going to happen? I can tell you that as a fan, I would love for it to happen. There's nothing more I would love for them to get back together, and just it would be one of the biggest. They would be one of the biggest touring acts in the world. Like they would play stadiums around the world, no doubt. I mean, it would be huge. It would be just massive if the original Guns N' Roses got back together. Oh my God, that would be massive. The thing is, though, I'm in the camp of like, I'll believe it when I see it. For something like that to happen, even if it was a tour or something, there would be so many negotiations and things that would have to happen behind the scenes for something like that to go down, because there's so much money involved. And you have guys with their own lawyers, with their own managers, and now it's a situation where Axl Rose has pretty much had the rights to the Guns N' Roses name. He has had sole ownership of that for the last 20 years. And I gotta tell you guys, I don't think he's gonna give that up anytime soon. And that may or may not still be a sticking point with Slash, with Izzy. Izzy left the band because of that in the middle of the Use Your Illusion tour. And, it's... I gotta tell you, man, I just, there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of egos involved in that whole deal. And, if there is some sort of reunion, which people say it's inevitable, if it does happen, I don't see it lasting like that long. Like, it might just be like a one and done thing. It might just be one tour, or, I don't know if there would be any new music that would come of it. I mean, I would love to hear new Guns N' Roses music, but again, it's tough. Like, would that even get airplay? If it does, I mean, let's face facts. I mean, music fans are so fickle nowadays that, Guns N' Roses could write the best music you could think of. It could be a complete masterpiece, but people want to hear those songs, those classic GNR songs. I mean, it's tough living up to a legacy like that. And I don't see how anything they could do could possibly be as well received as those, as those classic hits are. So, again, it's a very tough thing. And, and I don't mean to sound cynical, but I'm sort of in the camp where it's like, I'll believe it when I see it, because nothing has happened yet. If it does, I don't know what it would be or what would come out of it, and I guess part of me might sound a little cynical, because I think we need a lot more new young bands, to come up and shake things up the way Guns did back in the 80s, in the mid 80s, when, they came and completely just changed the game for a little bit and just set the world on fire. There hasn't been a new young rock band that has done that in a long time. And, and that in itself is a very difficult thing nowadays, because everyone is so divided and segmented. This is the internet age we're living in. It's very difficult. It's damn near impossible to please everybody. And not that GNR pleased everybody, but they really grabbed a lot of people's attentions, and they crossed over in a big bad way. So I don't know. I mean, a lot of the biggest selling, touring acts are just, bands that have been around for years and years and years. So it's like, once those bands retire, then what? We need to really put over the next generation of rock bands. And look, I know this sounds a little self-serving, because I'm in a band myself, and, we're a younger band. We're trying to make a name for ourselves. I'm not even necessarily talking about me or my own band. I'm talking about just the future of rock and roll. I want to see it move forward, and I want to see it have that mainstream attention again. And I think that it can happen one day. I don't know what it would take or what it would be, but, it's something I genuinely worry about. So, that's just the thing. I think people get so cranked up about these reunions of classic bands like GNR, and I would love to see it happen, but will it happen? How long will it last? What effect will that have? I don't know. I think if they do get back together, it'll be one of the biggest things going. I think it'll just make tons of money, which is awesome, because those guys deserve it. They I mean, they're one of the greatest rock bands of all time, period. They're legends, and I would love to see it happen, but, at the same time, I don't know if it would last. Sometimes there's a reason why these bands break up. My official stance on the GNR reunion is that I will believe it when I see it. As far as upcoming events, my next show with Vertebreaker, that includes Ryan, of course, that will be Saturday, September 5th at the Boondocks, or as it's now called, Boondocks Live in Melbourne, which that place, of course, is sort of our home base. We will be there opening for our friends Dare Defy for their single release party. They're releasing a new song called Lovesick. I haven't heard it yet, but I'm sure it's going to be awesome. We will be there with Thought of Redemption, as well as some great bands from out of town, Inception and Acnu. So definitely come and check that out. It's going to be a very very heavy night, but it's also going to be all ages. It's an all ages show, so it doesn't matter how old you are. You can come check us out. It should be a great night. Definitely don't miss it. So that is it for this episode of the Phoenix Report. As always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at jackxconnor. Like me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/jackconnormusic. Also, feel free to check out the band, that's me, Ryan, along with Rod, Greg, and Jarrett, over at www.vertebreaker.net. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, make sure you email me at jackconnorpodcast@gmail.com or tweet me with the hashtag Phoenix Report. If you have any questions for the band, email us at vertebreaker@yahoo.com. And make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, and go back and listen to all the other episodes. And we might be making a big move here at the Phoenix Report. We might be getting on iTunes pretty soon. As of the time I record this, we're not on iTunes yet, but who knows? By the time you hear this, you might be listening to this on iTunes right now. But hopefully, if what I say is true, that we will be on there. And I'll still post stuff here on YouTube as well, so don't worry about that. Well, anyways, that's it for this episode of the Phoenix Report. I'm Jack Connor. Thank you guys for tuning in. I will see you later. Bye.